I'm Jennifer Della Quadri, and this is the Raising Happy Teens podcast, where you learn how to successfully guide your teenager into adulthood without losing your sanity in the process. Let's do this. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm so glad you're here, and I just wanted to thank those of you who have been reaching out to me and commenting on my latest episode where I was talking about menopause and midlife and all of that. I love hearing from you, and I really am so glad that that episode resonated with so many of you because it was, for me, stepping out of my comfort zone a little bit. And so when I do that, I was following my intuition, and I'm just so glad to hear that it resonated with so many of you. So thanks for reaching out. Thanks for sharing it. And thanks for being here. Thanks for being back. If you missed it, you can go back and listen. So it was so funny because I was getting ready to record this episode. I had all my notes ready and I was ready to hit record. And I kept getting this error message in the software that I use. It was saying it wasn't recording. And I went to the online help and I was, getting frustrated because nothing seemed to be working. And so I was like, what am I supposed to do here? So of course I went to ChatGPT, my other assistant, helped me figure out what's going on here. And turns out all the problem solving led to the fact that I needed a new update on my software, on my operating system, on my computer. So I went ahead and activated that and I walked away. I had a couple slices of pizza, I had a conversation with my mom, and now I'm back. And I feel better. And I've got an upgrade happening. And I love that because I also feel like this podcast is having an upgrade. So the upgrade for my computer just kind of goes along with it. I mentioned this in the previous episode that I mentioned, but moving forward, I'm still going to be talking about how to parent a teenager and how to raise a happy teen and a young adult. But the conversations that we're going to be having on here are going to have to do with a lot more. They're going to have to do with being a better person and living your best life. I hate it when people say that because it's like, what the heck does that even mean? I don't know. But I'm going to be showing up here even more so as myself. I've been myself in the past, but it's been a little bit curated. It's the people-pleasing side of me, and this new upgraded version of me, this new iOS, doesn't want to deal with that anymore. And so that's how I'm showing up. And today's episode, as all of them, is going to help you with your teenager, and it's going to help you with so much more. Because I'm going to be talking about a strategy that I learned and I've been implementing in my life. I've been sharing it with my clients and they've been implementing it in their life. And it is a completely different way of approaching difficult conversations. I know I've talked about difficult conversations in the past, and the strategies that I've shared there, it's like they're ingrained and embedded in what I'm getting ready to share with you here for sure. But the strategies I'm sharing with you, they're not actually mine. They're from Dr. Stuart Avalon, who I listen to on the Mel Robbins podcast. I know a lot of you listen to that as well. Maybe you heard that episode. And so as a parent coach and as a coach, when I hear something from the personal development world or from the academic world, I always run it through my filter because I have a unique perspective. I have a different perspective. Everybody who hears those things does. And I like to run it through that filter and then offer it to my audience with a different lens on it or my perspective on it. So if you haven't heard that podcast episode, definitely go listen to it. Check out his books, check out all of his work. He is an incredible person who has done so much research to help children in schools, which is near and dear to my heart as well, having been a teacher for 14 years in my life. But today I'm going to be talking about what to do when someone is not doing the things that you want them to do. Now, this could be your teenager. This could be your spouse. This could be your friend. This could be your parents. This could be a coworker. Someone is not doing the thing that you want them to do. And I'm also going to say this could be you. You're not doing the thing that you want yourself to be doing. Anyone in your life. And how to motivate that person to do the thing. So I'm going to start by giving you a little background on the theories that Dr. Stuart Avalon talks about. And then I'm going to share with you how you can use this information in parenting and in other relationships where that person is not doing the thing that you want them to do. So the perspective shift for me was really profound because a lot of parents come to me and they're just frustrated because their teenager is not motivated. And also they come to me because they're not motivated, right? That's a big struggle. And in the past, I've talked a lot about how to be motivated. And I've talked about it starts with action. It doesn't start with motivation. You don't get motivation and then all of a sudden you decide that you want to take the action. It starts with taking the action even if you're not motivated. And then you start to see results, and that's what creates the motivation. And so that still applies here. But when it comes to your teenager, you can't force another person to take action. Not unless you're wanting to impose your will, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. But you can't make other people do things. Maybe when they were little, it was easier to do that, but now that they're older, or when you're dealing with adults, you can't. And that, I think, is where the frustration comes. So the perspective to offer here that Dr. Stuart Avalon brings up is that instead of looking at it as though they are not doing it just out of the lack of will, that there is a lack of skill. So there's a skill that they are missing, or a skill that they're still developing, or that they don't have yet, and that's why they're not taking the action or doing the thing that you want them to do. And you can listen to the podcast and read his book and know what the skills are, but it all basically has to do with what type of knowledge you have and how you're able to apply it in the world. So some people might lack the empathy. They might lack the ability to stay organized. They might lack the ability to communicate effectively. But when you're able to see it through that perspective of they're not just doing it because they want to be a dick, they're not doing it because they lack the skill, or they're not communicating with me because they don't know how. There's a skill. It's a lack of skill, not a lack of will. And what that can do is if you can look at what's happening through that lens, they're working on a skill and they don't really have this skill yet, it can help you shift your mindset about what's going on and approach it with a little more compassion. And I mentioned that this applies to you as well. So if you are not following through on the things that you said you were going to do, like say you were going to start cutting out sugar and maybe eating more fruits and vegetables and watching what you eat, for example, and you're getting frustrated because you keep on falling back into your old habits or you don't feel motivated, it's not because you don't have the will, it's because you don't have a skill yet. There's a skill that's still being developed, and to approach it with compassion instead of blame. And so when you're dealing with someone in your life and your relationships, and you're able to shift your mindset to how would the situation look to you if you knew that they were really truly doing the best they can with the tools they have, and assume positive intent, then how would you approach the situation? So it's not that they're doing this thing because they want to be a pain in the butt. They're just lacking some skills, and assume positive intent. And just understand, like, what skill is it that needs to be developed, and then approach it from that. How can I help them develop this skill? Or how can I give them the opportunity? Or at least how can I give them the benefit of the doubt that they're doing it the best they can? And instead of forcing a strategy onto them, like, oh, I see, the problem here is that you don't know how to communicate. Let me give you a lesson on communication. That's not going to work. So instead of imposing those strategies and solutions, hoping that they are going to just comply or decide to do what you want them to do, what you can do here is stop and then reflect and figure out what it is about this situation that's frustrating you. And I'm not talking about behaviors specifically. I'm talking about the situations that are frustrating you. Write them down and just understand, what are these situations? Is it that they are not being respectful? or that they are not pulling their weight around the house. Then go from that. And this is back to Dr. Stuart Avalon. These are the 3 steps that he recommends, and I could not agree with him more. So when you figure out what it is that's frustrating you, you have 3 choices. Number 1 is just to let it go and just say, you know what, I don't have the time and energy, and I'm just going to go ahead and let this go because it's not worth it for me at this point. The next one is you can impose your will. And that's where you're like, okay, this is what's happening, whether you like it or not, right? And with your teenager, that might be enforcing some punishments or consequences. Also, consequences don't work. And I know I've talked about consequences a lot on this podcast, so you may be hearing that and thinking, well, what does that mean? Does that mean that I just back off and let my teenager do whatever the heck they want? Well, I don't want to do that. I don't mean that. So there are behaviors that they're going to do, and they will have consequences, like natural consequences, like not doing homework, and natural consequences, they don't do well in school, etc. But consequences in and of themselves don't work. They don't work to shift the behavior. All they might do is get your teenager into what's known as dissociative compliance. Like, yeah, whatever you say, Mom. Whatever you say, I'm going to go ahead and do it just because I don't want to deal with you yelling at me anymore or you being angry with me anymore. I'm just going to say yes. But it's not actually changing the core of what it is in this situation that's bothering you. So those are the first 2 options. You can let it go or you can impose your will. The third option is to collaborate. And collaboration, a lot of people think, is to sit down and tell the other person what they think should be done, and then just hearing what they have to say. But it's not. The approach is very different when you are truly wanting to collaborate. You go in there without a concrete idea of what you're hoping to walk away with. Instead, you go in with true curiosity, and it starts with empathy. And there's a lot of misunderstanding out there about what empathy means. People think it means just to be sensitive to other people's needs, but empathy means understanding. And to really understand what's going on with the other person, you need to have empathy and you need to be curious about what's going on, not judgmental. And I'm going to be the first to admit that that's hard to do, because if somebody's out there doing things that are frustrating to you, you're going to sometimes make it mean something about them or why they're doing it, or they don't like you, or they're mad at you, or they're disrespectful. You're going to have all these judgments in your head about why it's happening. And so it's hard to understand at that point. And that's where the work truly begins. Are you able to stop, recenter, reboot, and then approach the conversation with true, genuine empathy and curiosity? So when you're approaching with empathy, you're wanting to understand their perspective. So where they're coming from. And asking them questions, just without making any guesses, just getting information. And one of the sentence starters that he recommends is, and I love this so much, I know there must be an important reason why. And what this does, you fill in the blank with whatever it is the behavior is. Whatever this, when you approach it this way with empathy, it disarms them. So they don't feel like they need to get, defensive and start to prepare for an argument. And what this does too is it helps them regulate. You go into the conversation calm and grounded and with curiosity, open with empathy, and you're helping them regulate. You're co-regulating. What your emotions are feeds into them, and then they feed back into you, just like mirroring. I know I've talked about that on this podcast or in a workshop in the past. You're mirroring one another. You're giving them a chance to regulate themselves, and you're giving yourself a chance to understand so that they can be heard too. Once they have shared and you've given them a chance to listen, you've been an active listener, you've validated their feelings, then you get to share your perspective. You're not jumping into solutions yet. You're not telling them what you think about what they've said. You're sharing your perspective. So it's your turn, right? Everybody gets a turn. And then you can say, like, another really good thing to say is, I heard you, and not I heard you, but, because that's where the defensiveness comes in. I heard you. And I also feel in the blank. Again, you start with the empathy, which is regulating, and then you share your perspective, and that's when you're relating to them. That's creating a trust building dynamic between the two of you. Once you've shared your perspective, then you invite them to problem solve together. Now, I think I've talked about in the past about fight or flight, and when you're triggered, you go into fight, flight, fawn, and freeze mode. No one is going to be able to come up with a good solution when they're in that fight or flight mode. So when you're regulating together, you're calming yourself down, you're relating, so you're getting a connection. Then you can start to reason. Then you can access the prefrontal cortex of your brain, the rational thinking side. That's where you can start coming up with solutions to help with the skills that need to be built. Come up with solutions to help with the skills that need to be built. Hear what they have to say, get suggestions from them, share your perspective. But the point is that you both walk away feeling like you've been heard, understood, and that you've gotten something out of the conversation. Now, I know that this process is not as straightforward as it seems. So you might be hearing this and thinking, well, yeah, but in this situation, but what if they do this? But if you go into it and you actually allow yourself to be genuinely curious and compassionate, it will be a more productive conversation. That's where you're going to be collaborative. So let me talk about this. Let me apply this to an actual scenario. And I'm going to, of course, use a situation with your teenager, because this is a podcast called Raising Happy Teens. Let's say your teenager, this is one of the biggest things that comes up all the time. Your teenager is on their phone nonstop, and you don't like it. You've given them boundaries, you've talked about it, they've agreed, like, hey, yeah, it's true, I probably spend too much time on my phone. Maybe you have limits on when the internet is available or when they're able to access their phone, but it still feels like a challenge, and you're still seeing the behavior of them waking up in the morning and grabbing their phone first thing. We'll use that as an example. And you've talked about it. You've talked about how it's not healthy. They've agreed. They've heard it. They know all the research, yet they're still doing it. Now remember, when you're approaching the conversation, it's not about the behavior. It's about the situation. The situation is the phone use in general, okay? But of course, when you're addressing, there's a skill here that's missing. What skill has your teenager not quite learned yet, or are they in the process of learning in order to be able to manage this? And for your teenager, maybe they just haven't learned the skill of regulation, self-regulation. I don't know how to stop myself from getting my phone, right? So looking at it through that lens with a little empathy. And then when you talk with them, make sure that everybody's in a neutral or good mood, not at a tough time when you're in the middle of an argument. And you come up with empathy. Hey, I noticed we had that conversation about picking up the phone first thing in the morning, and I thought that we were in agreement that wasn't a healthy thing. And I just noticed that you've been picking up your phone first thing in the morning. And I know there must be an important reason why you're doing that. I just want to understand what's going on. Let them share. Maybe they're anxious, and picking up their phone first thing helps them feel a little more calm. Maybe they're waiting for a text from their friend, and it helps them feel more comfortable about going to school when they're able to connect with their friend first thing. But let them share. Hear what they have to say, validate it, normalize it. And then you're going to share your perspective. Okay, I hear you. And I'm also still concerned about your mental health. And I'm concerned about the amount of time you spend on your phone. And from all the studies I've read, it's not healthy to look at your phone first thing in the morning. It's healthy to get up and to boot your system up and get prepared for the day. How can we work together to come to a solution here? And maybe that means them getting support for their mental health. Maybe that means you making sure that you are setting up a way for them to be able to see their friend in the morning, right? Like, hear what they have to say, get their ideas, share yours. Like, let it be fun, right? It doesn't have to be we're having this sit-down meeting and I'm going to get my whiteboard and make a diagram and make spreadsheets. Nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to do that. Let it be fun. Let it be light. Let it be positive. Because after all, the whole point of it is to have a more positive relationship with this person. And in this situation, it's your teenager. So when you're going through this process, it's really important that you're patient with yourself, you're patient with the other person, and you're really trusting that everyone involved is doing the best they can with what they have available to them. And maybe there just are some skills that need to be developed. Maybe it needs to be approached with a little more empathy and compassion, especially if it's you getting hard on yourself for not doing something that you said you were going to do. Now that we're in the middle to late January and those New Year's resolutions might be kind of falling off, always compassion and curiosity. Okay, so those 3 steps or those 3 options you have. Anytime someone is not doing the thing that you said or that you're wanting them to do, you can drop it, impose your will, or you can collaborate. And there's some steps there. Make sure you're following it with empathy. Address your mindset around it. Make sure you're grounded and calm in the process. I promise you, if you're able to stay grounded and regulate your nervous system, all areas of your life will improve. So pay attention to those thoughts. Pay attention to what's going on in your body when you're frustrated. Give yourself opportunities to heal from that, to address it, be aware. And know that there is no end point where you have it all figured out. You're figuring it out along the way. Okay? So give that a try. And I would love to hear from you. Again, leave a comment. Give me a thumbs up. Find me on Instagram, jennifer.delaquadri. Let's connect. Let's be friends. And know that I'm here to support you, whether it's in raising a happy teenager or figuring out the next iteration of your life as you start to grow and develop and figure out who you are and what you want and what you don't want. I coach on more than parenting. Yes, people come to me because they want a better relationship with their teenager, but that's not all there is to you. You have a lot more going on in your life, and all areas of your life impact all areas of your life. So if you're dissatisfied in one area, it's going to impact other areas as well. And if you have patterns in relationships, there are going to be patterns in all of your relationships. Every time you get that signal, it's a reminder to you. This is a lesson I'm still learning. And I can be your partner through that. And I'd love to be able to talk with you about how we could work together to help make this next phase of your life the best phase yet. As always, the link to schedule a consultation is below. Go ahead and click, find a time on my schedule where we can connect, or send me an email if none of those times work for you. I would love to talk with you about parenting, about life, about what you want for yourself. I'd love to help make that happen for you. And as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you next time. If you liked this episode, I'd like to invite you to join Raising Happy Teens, my free online community for parents of teenagers, where every week I host Ask a Coach. You bring your parenting questions, and I provide expert advice and coaching. Click the link in the show notes to join today. I'll see you inside.